Hey, I'm Brian Saunders, the CEO at BigTime Software, and I'm here with Shane Anastasi today, who is the CEO of PS Principles and consultant and at a training firm that helps transform the way PS firms deliver customer work. How are you doing, Shane?
Great, Brian. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Shane and I met a couple of years ago when Godard Abel, who used to run Big Machines and now runs G2 in Chicago, suggested I talk to you. And I remember we were talking about how projects go off the rails, and he said you should talk to Shane because he cures that problem for a living, which is pretty high praise from somebody that I have a ton of respect for. So I'm curious, how did you and Godard meet?
Yeah, we met at Big Machines and he invited me up. I was looking for an opportunity to move to Chicago and he had one. And, he was honest from the beginning. He said it's going to be pretty tough. And so we took the challenge and we came out and we did it. It was a lot of fun. He's a great man to work with.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. Well, listen, let's dive in. We've got a lot to cover. The goal behind this, before we kind of deal with the mythology behind what keeps project teams from achieving success, I guess we should start with kind of a definition of success. What is it? And in a project, that everybody has a different opinion. And I've actually seen you write and heard you say that on time and on budget is not the same thing as successful. Is that the primal myth that needs busting?
Yeah, it's a good start. I mean, it's definitely one that encourages the wrong behavior from the consultants. And I think that's what we have to think about
Okay.
as professional services managers and executives. What behavior are we promoting in the field? And on time just promotes the behavior of let's give them a low quality solution on time. And,
Interesting.
and what we, if we scratch the surface on most deliverable dates, they're arbitrary.
Hmm.
Now, sometimes we're trying to make a sales kickoff, or we're trying to, not get penalties, which is that's a fair, situation where we want to give a customer a solution on time. But for the most part, the dates are somewhat made up, and really at the end of the day, what the customer remembers is quality, not timeliness.
Hmm.
And so we've sat through so many post-project reviews where the team has said, we gave them the solution knowing that there was holes in it, knowing that it wasn't finished, only because that was the deliverable deadline. And the big thing that always got me there was let's escalate that.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the conversation with the customer that says you don't want a crappy solution.
Right.
You want to
The
wait.
budget and the timeline aren't as important to you as these four things that we've discovered now that we've
Right.
been working together for a bit.
Well, especially when the customer is then going to own that solution back inside their own environment, right?
Sure.
I don't want to set you up for failure. I want to set you up for success. I want you to be the champion, our champion. So let's give you a good solution. So that's on time. On budget makes the suggestion that the initial budget of the SOW is the most important thing to deliver to. But what if the customer wants more scope? What if they want something that wasn't requested? Let's not blow what success means by doing the right thing and charging the customer for additional scope. This kind of behavior that we incentivize with on time and on budget is that, well, let's give it to them for free and not blow the budget. And to
Okay.
me, it's just the antithesis of what it is that we want to do on projects.
Got it. Got it. And so when we talk about these myths like that one, that like what is the definition of success and how do we get to a better one? Did you uncover that at Cirrus One? Is that where you kind of started to play with this?
Yeah, at Cirrus One, that was really the second part of a two-step process. The first step was uncovering the myths, and that was
Okay.
really kind of with Goddard at Big Machines.
I see.
And the equity firm there, given the situation that we had, said, look, get in there and fix this as quickly as possible. And I'd started my usual way of fixing things, and they said, it's not fast enough. You've got to go do these things. And they seemed very unnatural at the time because I'd never done them, not to this degree, like not walk in and just say to customers, we're done, right? I mean, we needed to fix the circumstances as quickly as possible, and we
Okay.
had complete backing of the board. And so we went and we did it, and we started to uncover these things about project dynamics that we just weren't paying attention to. And so I wrote the book at the end of that, which is about 2014, and
Okay.
started to say, hey, look, there's these dynamics that we're not aware of in projects, and we should be doing things differently. But it wasn't
Got it.
until Cirrus One where we started to put solutions into practice. And the reality was, some of them took a time to find, but that's where we actually put them into practice and said, okay, these are now the best practices that we think every firm should be following.
Interesting. Interesting. And I know one of those that's kind of fundamental as it relates to success is how you guys defined it there. Can you just give us a couple of sentences on that? Because I know that that's a big piece of the shift away from on time and on budget toward something else.
Absolutely, and we took a time to arrive at it. When we started the company, we said, look, we cannot be the partners of a professional services, firm if we don't know what it is that we're shooting for, and we can't explain it to the field. And so we sat down and we wanted a very tangible field definition of success, and we ended up with this something that surprisingly was simple, which is our job is to make every project profitable. That's the business that we're in. But at the same time, we must make every customer referenceable.
Interesting.
And what that means, it doesn't have to be they signed a marketing reference document, but that if somebody said to them into the street, did you like working with Cirrus One, that their answer would be yes. And so that's what we set up as success. And we asked every customer, would you be a reference if you were asked by a colleague? And we ran our organization to a 96% project success rate, which means in 96% of the 175 projects we did, that we got both a referenceable client and we made money.
That's amazing. And most of us, when we think of that, we think, oh, well, this is where the customer is always right comes in, right? Because you must bend over backwards and do whatever they tell you. So given the fact that they're 96% referenceable, are you really saying that the customer is always right is a myth that needs to be busted?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we inherited that myth from the consumer world. The customer is always right. If the customer doesn't like their sandwich, give them another sandwich. That doesn't work in a $650,000 services right? The customer is too involved in the process itself. The customer is always right works when the customer isn't intimately involved in helping you create the outcome.
Right. They're not back there making the sandwich behind the counter. They're,
Right, and then suddenly they got ingredients everywhere, and they got their fingers in this. It's like, get out of here. Right? Let me do what I do best, which is make sandwiches. And so it's really funny that we've inherited this idea that the customer is always right, and it's not that we want to demonize the customer either. We do this out of love. We want the customer to be successful, but a part of that is that you need to follow my lead. Why?
Successful versus happiness. Like, your goal is this long-term success, as opposed to in the short term, you're doing all this work to get a project implemented. Of course, it's going to be difficult. Like the goal is to be working together toward that long-term success.
Right, and the customer doesn't know the ins and outs of the products. Right, that's what we're there for. And so they're very liable to make short-term decisions that have long-term consequences. And if we're not trying to keep them safe from those, then we're not doing our job. And so success has to trump happiness in the short term.
Success trumps happiness that's a great mantra. To get one thing out of this, that's probably a big one. There's a couple of others that I want to get to within the time that we've got, though. And it starts, I think, when you talk about it, Shane, where I've heard you speak, it starts with the SOW, right? It starts with this mythology that the SOW has to contain anything and everything the customer might want.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a general theory on this, is that for years we started to focus on the idea of on time, on budget. Now, we realized that wasn't working very well for us, and so our attention went to the SOW. Now, when I started...
the fault of the sales team.
What's that, sorry?
It must be the fault of the sales team.
Right, that's right. We're not writing the SOWs well enough. Now, the problem with that, though, is that, when I joined IBM in 1994, the first thing I got taught was how to kind of de-risk or get through the risk process. So IBM, Accenture, all the big SIs, they focus their attention on risk mitigation. Now, the problem with that is that they wanted to write watertight SOWs. Well, we don't know what the solution is yet. So how can we write a watertight SOW? We haven't done the design.
Right.
So if you're preempting that you think you know the detail that's going to be uncovered as we go through this journey of discovery and understand what the customer actually wants to do, then you're painting yourself into a corner to build a solution that nobody wants.
Yeah, talk about that thing. You mentioned this before when we were talking. Talk about the at Cirrus. You said if you pay for whatever you go over on design, if we over design and you pay for it, then I'll guarantee that you won't go over on development or something similar.
Yeah. So one of the things that we decided to do in order to account for this, right, is that most projects actually ruin themselves as they go over design and start to consume build budget to finish design. That just short changes the build process.
Yeah.
right? So we run out of funds during testing, and we think that that's the issue, but that's not the issue. The issue is that we couldn't finish the design process in time. So what we did is we didn't give the project managers all of the project budget. We just gave them the design budget. And when they didn't finish design on time, the project ran out of money. Well, that escalated, and that ended up with our stakeholders having to talk to their stakeholders and say why. Well, 9 times out of 10, it's because the customer hadn't been able to give us the information that we needed on time. So we came up with this idea of how do we get through this dilemma
Yeah.
instead of just investing in every account. And so we came up with the idea that said, look, let's do it this way. We need 100 more hours for design. You buy the 100 hours, but here's what we'll do. We'll give you 100 hours at the end of the project should we need it. If we go long, we'll give you that 100 hours back. And if they
Great.
said no, then I just doubled it on the spot. I'll give you 200 hours back. Now, we did that because what we learned over time is that if you let a project actually finish its design phase without ruining its build budget, your team actually has a pretty good chance of building that design inside of that time frame.
Well, it's
They're good at what
96%,
they
right?
do.
On budget, or profitable and referenceable. So
Right.
the proof is in the pudding, I guess.
And that's
That's
another
great.
myth. The myth that we have to give the project team all of the budget as soon as the SOW is signed. And that's
Super
just
important.
not true. We called it stage gate budget phasing or whatever it was called. I can't remember the name, but
Yeah.
basically chop the project into phases and just fund each project phase by phase. And if you write that into your SOW, which is what the SOW should be about, which is how are we going to fund and make this project work? Not what are we building, because we don't know yet, right? It should be
Yep.
about how are we going to make this project work as a team, and then that allows you to run that budget process, and it works very, very well. It's one of the top, 1 or 2 things that we think turn the tide on our project
Okay.
success rate.
So I know we have a lot to cover, but I want to jump around a little bit because we're running a tiny bit short on time, Shane. But I do want to get to this concept of, I've got a team, I'm on the project. The customer, for whatever reason, needs to slow it down, or they just can't deliver on time. And you guys had another trick there where you kind of dealt with that situation in a unique way that really helped you guys maintain profitability in the organization, and also allow customers to slow down or even stop a project when they needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the general things that we've seen, doing what I do and looking at hundreds of projects across hundreds of customers, one of the things that we've noticed is this idea that occurs of layering projects onto consultants.
Yeah.
And what we've found is the more we layer projects on consultants, the less focus they have, and that results in less quality.
Okay.
So ideally, in an ideal world, we thought in a perfect services firm, consultants would have one project. Now,
Okay.
that's probably like a myth in itself as well, right? We're not going to get to that. So what we did is we gave every consultant 2 projects, and we said we never put projects on hold.
Okay.
If a customer wants to put a
You
project
never put projects on hold?
but they lose the whole team.
Oh,
So
okay.
see, every SOW is an agreement to get our team working for you because you want to pay for their time. Well, that didn't include then taking that 600 hours over 3 months, which is our revenue generation, right?
Mhm.
That's our revenue generation. I'm giving you 600 hours in 3 months.
Right.
That wasn't an agreement to make that 600 hours suddenly over 6 months.
Right.
That fundamentally changes my revenue generation. And as a result, I need to find another project to put on that consultant who's now distracted to work with somebody else.
Right.
So we thought no projects go on hold. And out of 175 projects, we ended up putting 1 on hold. A customer had a very specific circumstance. Otherwise, what we said is, look, we can't control your prioritization. We can't. And if you have to deprioritize, that's fine. But here's what happens. And we wrote this into the SOW. You lose the resources.
Yeah.
I've got other projects of people willing to pay. So here's what we'll do. We'll stop the project. You'll probably get a restart fee of some sort. Not that we charge it as a fee, but it's going to take more hours to start back up. We're going to have to get that team together and orient them, right? But that's what the consequence is of you having to do this. And to be
And you
honest,
have that hard conversation, it sounds like, early. You're having a conversation to say, when is it going to restart? Because that's when the team's going to come back. And you have to have that conversation early, as opposed to letting it all these problems you have with profitability in a consulting firm are really related to ignoring a problem that is festering. And so it
Absolutely.
forces you to address it, because suddenly I don't have 50% of my time on that project anymore. We're going to have to move you to another project.
Absolutely. And the customers' responses were mixed. Some customers said, no, 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 it's important. Let's get back to it and let's amp up the resource usage. And some said, you know what? You're probably right. It's probably best for us to put this on hold because we can't use the resources right now because we're prioritizing other things. And so it's really what's best for the customer, not us, but we're just holding firm to the fact that our revenue generation was a promise that we agreed. That was part of the contract and why we agreed to do it, which
Yeah.
was this many hours over this period of time. And you can, muck around with it a little bit, but you can't put a project on hold and think that we're just going to keep the same team sitting around waiting for you to come back. So, and it worked really, really well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then, are you saying that you control everything on a project as the service provider?
Yeah, that's a myth. No, so we tried to. That was actually one of the goals that we kind of set about, like what can we control? And
Got
what
it.
we learned is that we actually control a lot more than we think we do. And that was a great example, right? If I go in and I teach this stuff all day and I say to people, stop putting projects on hold, and they say, there's no way we could do that. I'm like,
Right.
well, you kind of can.
Yeah.
Now you can't stop it entirely, but you could probably stop about 99% of these projects from going on hold simply by going in and saying, hey, look, what are you going to do? Like we're going to rip the resources away. They've got other things to do. We're no longer going to care about this project. Is that okay? And you're going to get the true response. Some
Yeah.
of those projects, I did this elsewhere actually in a software company, and I'm glad we did because we had something like 80 projects, 40 of which were on hold, 50 of them were on hold. And we went back and we said, hey, we're going to remove the team. Is that okay by you? And what we found out is that 90% of the customers didn't care.
Hmm.
They weren't buying the software to implement it. They bought it. It was part of a kind of R&D exercise.
Yeah.
And that told us ahead of the game that we
Right.
were actually in a lot of trouble. And so it
Shelfware.
was better to find that out then than it was over the next 12 months. So
And I imagine it gets the customer committed to what it is you agreed collectively you committed to.
absolutely. So here's another one, right? We always get caught getting a solution into production. And the
Okay.
solution goes into production, and then the customer's not happy, and then they want a list of changes, and we get caught in this production cycle. Well,
Happens all
why
the
do we
time.
let the customer go live into production?
Hmm.
Like,
Just
can we
pass it.
control that? Of course we can. We can just have a statement that says you get one migration into production. Now, is that fair? Well, of course it is, because the customer owns the production environment, not us. And their job should be to test that what we built is going to work in production. And the customer is the arbiter of production. They are the person that says, yes, make this a part of our operating environment. Every time they let us put it into production, what's happened is they've taken the commercial value of the solution without paying the commercial price. And now
Okay.
what they do is they hold payment as a leverage, as a lever, to say, fix all these things for me, and then I'll pay you. So the reason we get into that situation isn't the customer being nasty. The customer just wants the greatest amount of value for the least amount of price. And every customer wants that. I want that when I go in a store. We as the service provider allow them to create that leverage
Yeah.
against us. And that's what we've got to learn about the art of delivering projects successfully.
So it's basically their shortcut to cutting the timeline. Like, let's just get it into production. And what you've effectively done is created more problems than you solved, as opposed to, okay, this is the one time. Are you sure? And here's the 7 things we haven't done yet, whatever that happens to be.
Absolutely. And then it also focuses on quality, right?
Yeah.
Are
Okay.
you ready for this solution to be of the necessary quality to go into production?
Interesting. That's great. That's awesome. Well, listen, this has been super helpful, Shane. I really appreciate it. There's so many more of these that we could go through. We'll have to do another session like this. But in the interim, this whole idea of being a project Sherpa, of being the person who guides a customer on a journey as opposed to somebody who executes against an SOW. If our listeners want to get more information about that particular process, where should they go?
Yeah, they can head to our website. It's
Okay.
www.psprinciples.com, and there they'll find information on our training and certification, but also our Poly customer success story.
Okay.
It goes through their experience, what they did and how quickly they were able to pay for the training with the benefits they got from the field. So if they go there, they'll find tons of information.
Okay, that's perfect. That's awesome. And hopefully we'll get a chance to work together again. I know we're working on a couple of other projects. Kind of a project 911, I think was one that we were talking about. It's like car talk for project-based resources, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for that. It's actually
Yeah, that'll be a
it's
ton of
shaping up
fun.
pretty good.
Looking forward to it. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you very much for spending the time, and hopefully people got what they needed to get out of it.
Great. I appreciate the opportunity, Brian.
Talk soon.
Thanks very much.